Welcome,
Thank
Rosaria.
you. Thank you.
I'm so glad to welcome you to Grace Prez and to Nashville, Tennessee.
I'm
Is this
happy
your
to
first
be here.
visit?
It is.
So first question, are you surprised that no one has a cowboy hat on?
Not really.
Oh, good. Good. I checked back on March 8th when I first sent the email, would you consider coming to Nashville? So it's been about a year. We've been planning, praying, emailing back and forth. So a lot of prayer anticipation has gone into this. We do recognize, as Darren mentioned, this is an issue that's heavy, it's weighty. A lot of pain, a lot of shame around it. I'm guessing that many folks here may have had to push through a lot of fear to get here, and a lot of struggle. We want this to be a safe place for this conversation, a safe place for broken people to receive and share the healing grace of God, the finished work of Jesus Christ. So we want you to feel free and open when the questions come to ask your questions and have that time of conversation as well. We also don't take for granted that although you've written your story in a book and you've done this speaking thing many times now, that it's probably not still business as usual to come and share your life and be so open and vulnerable, and then after that ask for feedback. So we are so thankful for the way God is using you to help grow the church in its understanding of grace and truth through your testimony and your word. So let's get right to it. I want to start with how you begin the acknowledgement in your book, and then you can start from there.
It's going to be a long evening. That's first.
Yeah, here we go. Some may have. I'm guessing most have read the book. There may be some here that don't have a context, but we'll keep it. We'll keep it to the salient points. Okay. All right. Here we go. When I was 28 years old, I boldly declared myself lesbian. I was the finish of a PhD in English Literature and Cultural Studies. I was a teaching associate in one of the first and strongest women's study departments in the nation. I was being recruited by universities to take on faculty and administrative roles in advancing racial leftist ideologies. I genuinely believed that I was helping to make the world a better place. So kind of take us to that place and then from that place.
Okay, well, it might be a long evening in that case. You'll have to just sort of stop me, because I really do want to hear from you. I will keep it brief because I'll be saying a little bit more about this tomorrow as well. But I was raised in a secular feminist household, and I really thought I had a heterosexual adolescence. I mean, I don't know, I went to Catholic schools. It's kind of, it's not like it was obvious, but when I was in college, something just sort of snuck up on me, and it really took me by surprise. And it was simply that I preferred the company of women. Okay. That didn't really, rock my world or anyone else's world. And then slowly over time, my lesbian identity, it just emerged. There wasn't a particular day I could point to. And it did not fill me with shame. I was not, in fact, sometimes people have asked me, how did your family respond to your Christian conversion? And it's a little hard to explain to people that in an unbelieving secular feminist household, coming out as a lesbian didn't even blip on the scale. My coming out as a Christian, now, that was bad news. So, worldview matters, right? So I was fine. I was fine. I had really, I thought everything I needed. I had found my real self. I found my identity. I was at the end of a PhD program. It's always, it's sort of like a marathon. The end of a PhD program is when you want to talk about it, not the beginning. So, life was fine. And I left for Syracuse to start an assistant professorship there. And while I was there, my partner and I were involved in, vital, life-giving activities, things that I value today. I don't know what else to say. A lesbian community is a vibrant, vital place with a great deal of caregiving and compassion and insight, and so it was. I was baffled by why, Bible-believing Christians wouldn't just leave me alone. I wasn't asking for friendship. I wasn't asking for approval. But it was tiresome to me, at gay pride marches to see those Bible verses on those placards, and they felt very much to me like sneaky little raids into my culture. And I don't like sneaky little raids. I didn't like it then, and I don't like it now, and you don't either. And then some of those placards were just ridiculous. One of my personal favorites was the placard that said, AIDS is God's curse on homosexuality. And then, one of my friends put a placard together that said, well, if AIDS is God's curse on homosexuality, then lesbians must be God's chosen people. Because. And so my only real interface with Christians was a sort of heavy-handed moralism, and it was almost like a sport to me. You can name that tune in 3 notes. How quickly can we just be done with this so that we can get on with it? Mm-hmm. And so it was in that posture that the Lord met me. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I suppose it is startling, but I guess because it's my life, it's not really startling because, especially if we think about our lives in Christ, it's always sort of unpredictable and bizarre and, providential if you have the big picture, but just, So I was working on, I just finished my tenure book, so, check. And now I was working on a book examining the religious right from a lesbian feminist point of view. And, the Promise Keepers came to town, and I was on a war against stupid. And I don't know what they did, something outrageous, like maybe my favorite parking space was not there that day, or, something really criminal. But, I was really up in arms that the university had just even allowed them to be there. And of course, it's very funny because, now I'm on the opposite end of all these conversations, and so these things come full circle. But, I had written a tiny little, what I thought was going to be just a tiny little editorial in the Syracuse newspaper, and they gave me a full page spread, and and I just had so much feedback from that little article that I just kept a file, hate mail, fan mail, and just filed things and moved on. And then one letter from Pastor Ken Smith was disarming. And I would say one of the things in looking back that I think about is that Christians don't need to fear being disarming with the gospel of peace. Ken didn't identify with me or try to meet me where I'm at. He asked me good questions. And, I was a good user at the time. I was writing a book on the religious right, and I thought, wow, a Bible-believing pastor wants to talk to me? Well, here's my research assistant. It did occur to me that as an English professor, I would have to read this book that got everybody else in trouble. My anthropologist friends could just go to Promise Keepers rallies and, interview people. How do you feel about so it was really in a posture of arrogance and pride and just, really quite complete happiness. I was fine. Life was good. That I entered into Ken and his wife Floy's world. And Ken and Floy are still around, and I just talked to them last week, and so they continue to be my spiritual parents. But it just started that way, and it started with a disarming letter that unfolded into many, many disarming conversations, but safe. One thing that people might not realize is the gay and lesbian community is also a community highly given to hospitality. And so, in fact, I really did cut my teeth as a pastor's wife in my gay and lesbian community, and in a queer community, especially in the late 80s, early 90s, that also meant burying people to the AIDS virus, right? So it wasn't just, after fellowship, after Bible study on the Lord's Day, if your, last name begins A through M, go to this house and bring a covered dish. There is nothing ever programmatic about fellowship in the gay and lesbian community. And so it was actually very startling to me to realize some of the limitations in a Christian community around fellowship and hospitality.
But not in Ken and Floyd's house.
In some ways, their house was just like my house. You never knew who was going to walk through the door. And whoever was going to walk through the door, Ken and Floyd would welcome them and sit them down and meet you right where you're at. And before long, the Bible was open, and I was quite smitten by the fact that I have a favorite dictionary, and of course I do, and it's the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary. It tells you about word etymology, and Ken loved that one too. So it was just great. I loved the way that Ken and Floyd, rather than moralizing kind of the big sweep of wrong, what they would do is they were very much Bible on life, life on Bible people. And there was something in the hermeneutic of that was very powerful to me. As an English professor, I'm a text person. I like to get into the ideas of a text. And it had not occurred to me that is what Christians do with the Bible. My only real experience with the Bible was the way Christians would sort of use it almost like a punctuation mark, to stop a conversation. Okay, the Bible says, okay. And that's not at all how Ken and Floyd would do it. Nor did I feel that, as a clearly, an out lesbian and an atheist and a heathen, I wasn't made to feel that my opinion didn't matter. So, which is sort of ridiculous now when I think about it sometimes. But, Ken was just very gracious and was very willing to meet me where I was at. Did not think that was some kind of a violation of his relationship with the Lord. And also was able to just accept me where I was at. We didn't argue about whether I was a lesbian. We didn't argue about what that meant or what that category was or if it was a choice or, he knew I wasn't a blank slate. And with that came a degree of respect that was also disarming.
So how was he able to hold intention? And when I read your book, this was the most compelling thing for me as a pastor, of course, is your conversion was tremendously dramatic. But the means by which God used him in your life, the ability that he had to hold in tension a doctrine of sin and repentance, and yet pursuing you in friendship and love. Those are the things that we sometimes find hard to keep in tension.
Right. I can believe very strongly that a Christian is to always be a good neighbor. And, it's funny because, probably in Nashville, like in Durham, what does that mean? But, in Syracuse, let me tell you what that means. Somebody has a snow plow and you don't. Somebody has a generator and you don't. Somebody has a wood-burning stove. It's just a little more brutal there. And I really had the sense that if I had never become a Christian, for as long as I lived in Syracuse, Ken, he was my neighbor. He was not afraid of loving and potentially losing. The other thing that was disarming, I had spent years in a lesbian community. The only men I really interfaced with were gay men, and even that, I was a bit of a, separatist. So, very infrequently. And a loving, godly Christian man who loves his wife, but at the same time has headship over his family. I had never seen anything like that. My parents fought like cats and dogs. I have cats and dogs. They don't fight as much as my parents fought. I have, never seen that. And so, again, it was really disarming. But there are a couple of things that Ken did that were important. He knew I was reading the Bible. He knew I was reading the Bible for the wrong reasons. That was fine with Ken. That was perfectly fine. So he was always encouraging me in my Bible reading. And really, I could be the chairperson of Overreaders Anonymous. So it doesn't, if you're like cheering me on to read something, you're my, automatic new best friend. So, and we loved, that really worked well. What also really worked well is that he did not invite me to church. And I never got the sense that he had any sort of designs on me. He was very patient. He allowed this was sort of compulsive, like all the reading that I do was compulsive reading. So I was reading the Bible many hours a day. At that point I was on a semester research leave, and a lot happens when you read the Bible for, up to 5 hours a day. I mean, a lot, even if you're an unbeliever, a lot happens. And, one of the things that happens when you read the Bible up to 5 hours a day is you're reading it in really big chunks. So, like a concept like original sin, if you're doing a verse a day, by the time you get to the bloodbath that original sin caused, you're walking with a cane. But if you're reading it 5 hours a day, it's almost like it's an action movie. How quickly that comes into the world. And I was startled at the beauty and the capaciousness of the Old Testament. I was stunned to realize that every literary genre is found in the Bible. I don't know, I just had a PhD in English, why would I know that, right? It was just, the whole thing was powerful. And the other thing Ken did was he welcomed my friends. He didn't say, well, you're welcome to come over, but don't you bring that girlfriend home, or I don't want to know so-and-so. I mean, he wanted to be where the people were.
He would go to parties that you would have?
Well, yeah, every Thursday night, my home was just open to people in the gay and lesbian community so that I could have a better handle of what was going on. And really, not a bad idea. Both pastors and professors should do that kind of thing if you really want to have your foot to the floor with where people are at. So I would do that, and because I was reading the Bible, and I've always been out, right? I was an out lesbian, now I'm an out Bible reader, and eventually I'm an out Christian, and my friends knew it was going on, and sometimes people had questions that I just did not know. And so Ken would come sometimes and just hang with people and listen. He did more listening. I will tell you that on those Thursday nights, he would sometimes just listen. And that was that.
So one of the things that we sort of remind ourselves here is that sometimes we think kindness is tacit approval instead of a means to gain access to the heart. Would you agree?
I do, and I think sometimes we rush. We're so busy. We have time for people on our schedule. Maybe because Ken and Floyd were older. I mean, they're much older now, but they were older when I met them. Time just sort of moved at a different pace for them. Also, they knew I was reading the Bible, so it wasn't as though they did not have the burden of having to, read the Bible for me and tell me what it means and be my friend. So they knew the pressure points, and but they weren't rushing me. They weren't, and in fact, if anything, when I look back on it, I mean, there was a time when I was really having a spiritual crisis, and this is years. Oh, that's the other thing I should tell you. This is, it was 2 years before I ever walked into the church. It would not even, occur to me to do that. So, and prior to that, about 6 months before that, I'd become a church stalker. And that's where you have your Starbucks and your New York Times, and you're in your little red truck with your lesbian bumper stickers, and you park at the coal muffler across the street from the church, and you watch all those people go in, and you think, wow, it's only across the street, but it could be, a million miles away. I was intrigued, but Ken did not rush me, and even when I asked questions that you might think would have been a lead-in for, okay, say the sinner's prayer, Ken was very, he made me take stock of myself before a holy God.
There's an authenticity about his pursuit of you. You didn't feel like a project, you felt like he cared about you and loved you.
I did. And I hope he felt the same, because at some point, we just got to be friends. You know, at some point, in fact, I even said, you know, I can't write this book. I just don't know what I believe. And Ken said, oh, well, you're going to keep reading the Bible? And I said, oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, you know, I think I think that there was a level of reciprocal, respect maybe.
And so part of the mission here is to help the church engage in the way that he did the homosexual gay community in a way that's redemptive. Let's just start with terminology. Nomenclature is important. I just used 2 words there that can be conversation stoppers and the conversation homosexual gay. You also will say that homophobia is a sin. Gotten some pushback on that.
Yeah.
Okay, help us understand why those terms are helpful and valuable to use.
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the things Ken did early on was I think he realized that we came from totally different worlds. And so he asked me about what vocabulary do I use? And so we had a good talk about that. And in the same way, you know, think about it. If you're meeting someone from a different culture, you know, wouldn't it make sense to say something like, how do you like to be addressed? Or, you know, how does this word or this category make you feel? I mean, I think that's just, in some ways, it's just good manners. I don't know. And I've heard people say, oh, you know, you're capitulating. And I'm like, well, okay, then I am. But I think we need to be willing to meet people where they're at. And so we had many good talks about, for example, the term gay lifestyle. You know, why is that? You know, that tends to be a word that really is not beloved in the LGBT community. In part because lifestyle is something that, you know, here today, gone tomorrow. You know, I remember once having, you know, an athlete's lifestyle. That, you know, I don't have that anymore. You know, so it did not. The term lifestyle doesn't. It does not resonate with the way that when you are in the community, your identity is your most important relational piece, both for how you understand yourself and how you relate to other people. And lifestyle just cheapens that. You know? And that's even in a community where some people would say they choose this and where other people say I was born this way. So, you know, apart from the, you know, what brought you to the community, you know, so we had some good talks about that, and Ken, you know, kept messing up, and he'd say, now correct me, and I think I still correct him, and I think, because it's hard to, you know, give up your favorite words.
And the point is you're trying to keep the conversation open, right, by using terms that aren't going to cut that short. Without violating conscience, without violating principle, you're able to discern, okay, where am I going to meet this person where they are, that I can continue to pursue them in a relationship. Right.
And I would just say it's just good manners to meet people where they're at. And now, you know, the shift, you know, and shifts happen because if you're friends long enough, you know, one of the things that happens when you're friends long enough is you grieve together. You grieve something together. You know, we live in a broken, fallen world. And to grieve with someone increases your trust and your intimacy in a very powerful, important way. And so you know, one of the things that happened, you know, that I really remember is that at some point, because I was reading the Bible and because Ken was fueling that, he and I would talk a little bit about, well, you know, this is a terminology in the Bible, you know, how's that resting with you, basically? And again, I'm a language person, so that matters to me also. That it wasn't something that I felt that I needed to be careless with also. But it was a striking thing. You know, there were a couple of things that really hit me between the eyes, and I'm so glad that it came to me in the privacy of my Bible reading. And not in a public shaming experience. But the first time that I realized that original sin meant everybody's born that way watershed idea and very scary to me. And I'll talk a little bit about this tomorrow. I had spent my life developing and articulating and loving and representing a totally different idea of homosexuality than that which I found in the Bible. And if Ken had made some of those private, really, and I mean private between me and the Lord, if he was always probing there with me, I think I all of those good feminist self-defense classes I took in New York would probably have, raised their ugly head. So he trusted the Lord enough to let me be alone with him. And I as a parent right now, with children all over the map in terms of sin and culture and life, that to me is a wonderful reminder. Do I trust my out-of-control child with the Lord, or do I need to micromanage this? And, Ken, that union with Christ is Ken's most talked about teachable point, is so obvious if you have been in his world, because he lives it.
Backtrack 1 second. So, help us to understand what homophobia is. Why is it a sin?
Okay. So that's kind of the contemporary. This is the... I recently wrote what I thought would just be a little blog piece in the Gospel Coalition, and in there I said that homosexuality is a sin, but so is homophobia, and I've gotten a lot of pushback on that, and that's just life these days. But here's what I mean by that. The Bible gives us a very clear orientation for humanity. It's a soul orientation. And Jesus, when he enters into a covenant with a believer, has a soul relationship. There are a lot of things that fragment our faith. And one is our sexual desires, no question about that, which, by the way, all have to be crucified, gay and straight. But I believe that homophobia, we know that homophobia is the fear of gay and lesbian people. But I would add to that homophobia is the fear of gay and lesbian people and the wholesale writing off of their souls. Accepting the idea that sexual orientation is a defining category. We are image bearers of a holy God. The category of sexual orientation is a post-19th century category. Came to us from Freud. That could be a long conversation, so I'm not going to go there. I'm just sort of, you want to be home by 9. But I do. I have a long conversation about that. Worldview matters. And so I think that we want to be careful with our gay and lesbian loved ones. Ken was careful with me. He saw me as an image bearer of a holy God. Oh, broken? Absolutely. Absolutely. Rebellious? No doubt. But an image bearer. And so he wasn't, he just, in some ways, he wasn't disrespectful about my lesbian relationship or my lesbian community, but he also didn't set up shop there. Because Ken knew something really important that I think sometimes we get tripped up on. He knew that my being a lesbian was actually not the biggest sin in my life. Go figure. And maybe that's true for the people you love. We just get really hung up on that one. It has a lobbying group. That's maybe why we get hung up on it, right? We don't even know what to say anymore. But Ken, I was the lobbying group, and Ken was not. He just wasn't going to set up shop there.